Imagine yourself resting upon the sun-warmed stones of the Mogao caves where you see the decorated and vibrant murals. High above this terrestrial anchor, a jagged charcoal fragment known as Atlas is performing a maneuver that defies all physics. The China National Space Administration recently moved this object into a classification reserved for active and controlled thermal propulsion systems. This object is slowing down without any signs of outgassing, which should terrify every single astronomer on the planet today. It is a mathematical impossibility for a dead rock to apply its own brakes in the dark vacuum of space. In July 2025, a thermal anomaly was flagged in the outer reaches of our very large solar system. The Purple Mountain Observatory confirmed that the brightness was shifting in a way that suggests a geometric and non-natural surface. Tracking stations recorded a specific deceleration that a physicist would describe as a deliberate and very calculated choice of motion. Telemetry data has stopped being shared with the international community as we move further into the year 2026. Engineers are in a state of quiet dread because the object rotates on a perfectly stabilized and very strange axis. The axis points directly toward our magnetic North Pole, while the shell appears to be composed of rare metallic hydrogen. When scientists hit the object with a radio pulse, it modulated the signal and sent back a human heartbeat frequency. What if the actual visitors prefer the language of gravity and silence rather than radio telescopes and bright flashing lights? What if this entity is a mirror or a gravitational weight placed in our path to see how we react? Ancient astronomers once spoke of guest stars that lingered in the sky to observe the courts of the imperial era. Perhaps we are rediscovering something that has been on a long timer, waiting for us to develop better eyes. We are a fragile species, defined by a brief flicker of consciousness between two vast and very long dark eternities. We find comfort in the predictable math of the stars, but when the math changes, our sense of safety dissolves. We are small beings on a blue marble, watching a dark pebble decide whether or not to finally stop here. Take a moment to wonder if the light from this object is passing through your own ceiling right now today. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The stars look the same from every balcony, yet tonight they feel just a little more crowded than before now. Leaked data from the servers contained a single phrase, suggesting that the visitor is not actually passing us by now. One theory suggests a sentinel is waiting, but there is another secret buried even deeper in our own ancient time. Let us go further into the mystery to see what else might be hidden behind the shadows of the stars. Picture yourself drifting in a small wooden boat on the West Lake in Hangzhou. The water so still it reflects the moon like a polished silver mirror. High above this tranquil scene, 3I Atlas has just completed its second unscheduled course correction since December 2025. The China National Space Administration has now moved the file to a restricted server, but the numbers that escaped tell a story of intentionality. If you think this is just another space rock, you are wrong, and the reason why is hidden in the object's shadow. On October 29th, 2025, a team of researchers led by Avi Loeb suggested that the object's trajectory could only be explained by a light sail or a hollowed-out interior. While the Harvard professor is careful to frame it as a possibility, the tracking data from the China National Space Administration suggests something far more concrete. The object's temperature remained a constant 20 degrees Celsius, even as it entered the lunar shadow. That is not natural physics. That is activation. Internal heating on a scale that suggests a functioning power source deep within the jagged exterior. The first conspiracy involves the lost telemetry from the Chang'e 6 lunar probe, which was reportedly redirected to photograph 3I Atlas at close range. Rumors from within the space agency suggest the photos did not show a cratered surface, but a series of interconnected hexagonal plates. The second anomaly is the gravitational wake. The object is dragging a small cloud of metallic dust behind it that seems to be organizing itself into a grid. The third is the mythic connection to the black stone of the Kaaba or the Benben stones of Egypt, ancient artifacts described as falling from heaven to seed the earth with knowledge. Could 3I Atlas be the original source, returning to collect the harvest? What if the asteroid belt is not a failed planet, but a debris field of a war that ended before our ancestors even walked upright? What if this object is a piece of automated technology designed to wake up only when it detects a certain level of electromagnetic noise from the third planet? We often think of ourselves as the masters of our domain, but in the context of cosmic time, we are merely a seasonal bloom. In the Sumerian tablets, there are references to gods who move in cycles of 3,600 years. If the math of 3I Atlas holds, its last visit would have coincided exactly with the rise of the first civilizations. We are looking at a clock that only ticks once every few millennia. You might think we are in control of our planetary defense, but here is why you are wrong. We are not the ones who decide when the meeting happens. I often wonder how many of you watching this are looking up at the same moon tonight, wondering the same thing. Tell me where you are listening from, and if you have noticed any strange lights in the sky since July 2025. Your observations might be more important than the redacted government reports. We are all part of this experiment now, whether we want to be or not. We have exactly 4 weeks until the object reaches its perihelion, and the China National Space Administration has just ordered a complete blackout of all civilian telescopes in the western provinces. Now, you could argue that this is all a series of astronomical coincidences, but here is where it gets dark. The blackout order, issued on December 28, 2025, was not framed as a matter of national security, but rather as an emergency measure to prevent orbital interference. It is a curious choice of words. One does not interfere with a dead rock merely by looking at it, unless the act of looking is itself a form of energy exchange. Let us consider the sheer scale of the logistical silence now descending over the Tibetan plateau. The large high-altitude air shower observatory, situated 4,400 meters above sea level, has been redirected from its study of gamma rays to focus exclusively on the empty space trailing 3I Atlas. The scientists there are no longer looking at the object itself, but at the wake it leaves behind in the fabric of the vacuum. It appears that the object is not moving through space so much as it is folding space around it, creating a pocket of localized physics that contradicts the Einsteinian model we have leaned upon for a century. Imagine the frustration of a doctoral student at the Nanjing University of Information Science and Technology, watching their life's work on planetary nebulae being deleted from the central server to make room for terabytes of encrypted telemetry that officially does not exist. The irony is quite thick, like the mountain fog of the Yellow Mountains. We are told to look away precisely when the view becomes interesting. There is a specific kind of arrogance in assuming that a curtain drawn over a province can hide a sun-glinting anomaly in the heavens. But the China National Space Administration is not worried about amateur astronomers seeing a dot of light. They are worried about what happens when that dot of light begins to blink in a recognizable code. In early January 2026, a leak from the Hainan spacecraft launch site suggested that the internal classification of 3I Atlas had been changed from near-Earth object to extrasolar kinetic asset. This is a distinction that carries heavy weight. A kinetic asset implies a tool, a mechanism, or perhaps a delivery system. Think about the energy required to bring an object of that mass, estimated at over 12 million metric tons, to a near halt in the inner solar system. If you were to use conventional chemical rockets, you would need a fuel tank the size of the moon, yet there is no exhaust, no heat signature. Only a quiet, persistent displacement of the cosmic microwave background radiation. It is moving with the effortless grace of a ghost passing through a locked door. Now, let us peel back another layer of this darkening reality. Within the classified circles of the Purple Mountain Observatory, there is talk of the three-body problem becoming a tangible, terrifying reality. 3I Atlas has positioned itself in a specific gravitational sweet spot, a point where it can influence the tides of Earth and the crustal stability of the Moon with the smallest of movements. If the object were to shift its mass by even a fraction of a percent, we would see a measurable increase in seismic activity along the Pacific Ring of Fire. It is holding a knife to the throat of the planet, not with fire, but with the simple, elegant application of gravity. You might think that our current technological state would allow us to intervene, but let me tell you why that is a comforting lie. Our fastest interceptor missiles would take months to reach it, and by the time they arrived, the object would have already completed its 4-week countdown to perihelion. The history of Chinese astronomy is paved with the concept of the mandate of heaven. When a star fell or a comet lingered, it was seen as a divine critique of the ruling power. In 2025, as the tracking data became more erratic, a group of historical linguists at Peking University were brought in to consult on a series of ancient oracle bone inscriptions dating back to the Shang dynasty. These inscriptions spoke of a stone that breathes and a light that hides in the shadow of the dragon. It is almost humorous, in a dry and dusty way, to think of modern astrophysicists in clean rooms consulting 3,000-year-old bones to understand a piece of hardware from the stars. But the ancients had a relationship with the sky that we have traded for pixels. They knew that some visitors do not come to speak, they come to wait. What if the perihelion on January 29th, 2026 is not just a close approach to the Sun, but a docking maneuver? Some theorists within the European Space Agency, speaking under the veil of anonymity, have suggested that the Sun is not just a star to an object like 3I Atlas. It is a charging station, a massive hydrogen-fueled battery. If the object is indeed a von Neumann probe, its arrival at the center of our system signifies the end of its dormant phase. It is waking up. And as it wakes, it is beginning to broadcast, not in radio waves, which are primitive and slow, but in gravitational pulses that vibrate through the very marrow of our bones. Think about the sensation of a heavy bass note at a concert, the way it thumps in your chest before you even hear it. That is what the tracking stations in Xinjiang are recording. A subharmonic thrum that seems to be terraforming the local space-time. This is where the humor of our situation becomes truly ironic. We have spent billions of dollars on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, looking for a polite greeting, while the actual answer is a vibration that makes the tectonic plates of the Earth groan in sympathy. It is a bit like waiting for a phone call and having the house shaken by a passing freight train instead. As we move closer to the end of this 4-week window, the atmosphere in the global scientific community is one of hushed, frantic preparation. The China National Space Administration has reportedly reached out to the Roscosmos Agency and NASA, not for a joint mission, but for a data-sharing pact that excludes the public. They are building a digital wall around 3I Atlas, as thick as the stones of the Great Wall itself. You might feel a sense of frustration at being left in the dark, but there is a certain mercy in ignorance. If you knew the exact frequency of the hum coming from that rock, you might never find the peace required to sleep again. Let us back up for a moment and look at the mathematical recurrence of the number 7 in the telemetry of 3I Atlas. Every 7 hours, the object emits a burst of polarized light. Every 7 days, it adjusts its orientation by 7 degrees. In many ancient traditions, 7 is the number of completion, the number of the heavens. End quote. It is a rhythmic, ritualized movement that suggests a ceremony is taking place in the cold dark, a ritual that we are witnessing from the cheap seats of the cosmic theater. The China National Space Administration knows that this is not a random sequence. It is a clock, and the clock is ticking toward a midnight we are not prepared to face. There is a theory, whispered in the corridors of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, that 3I Atlas is not actually a solid object at all. Instead, it is a projection, a holographic interface of such high density that it interacts with gravity as if it were matter. If this is true, then we are not looking at a ship, but at a shadow cast from a higher dimension, a finger dipping into the water of our 3-dimensional pond. This would explain the reclassification. You cannot track a shadow using ballistic math. You have to use the math of light and perspective. The silence from the western provinces is now nearly absolute. No photographs, no blog posts, no leaked coordinates, but the sky cannot be censored forever. On the night of January 15th, 2026, the object will be at its most visible point for those with high-altitude, clear skies. It will look like a star that refuses to twinkle, a steady, unblinking eye of lead-grey light. It is watching the transition of the winter constellations, unmoved by the frantic scurrying of the 8 billion souls below. You might think that such a massive event would change our lives in an instant, but the reality of the cosmic scale is much slower. It is a slow burn, a gradual realization that the floor beneath us is not as solid as we believed. We are part of a choreography that began before our sun was even born. The China National Space Administration has seen the choreography, and they have decided that the audience is not yet ready for the final act. But the music has already started, the hum is getting louder, and the 4-week countdown is already halfway through. It is a quiet dread, isn't it? To know that something is happening just beyond the reach of your vision, something that makes the most powerful people on Earth whisper in darkened rooms. But for now, the moon is still there, the stars are still in their places, and 3I Atlas is still holding its breath, waiting for the sun to touch its cold, metallic heart. The further we go into the redacted files of the China National Space Administration, the more we find that the blackout was not just about hiding the object from our eyes, but about hiding us from its sensors. There is a chilling concept in the late December 2025 briefings referred to as signature minimization. The government wasn't just turning off telescopes. They were testing the ability to dim the electronic footprint of entire cities. It suggests a terrifying possibility that 3I Atlas is sensitive to our level of development, that it is a predator or perhaps a gardener reacting to the heat and light of our civilization. Consider the dry irony of our current era. We have spent the last century shouting into the void with television broadcasts, satellite pings, and radar sweeps, and now, at the very moment something hears us, we are being told to hold our breath and hide under the covers. The China National Space Administration's reclassification of the tracking data occurred exactly 48 hours after the object's echo matched the heartbeat of that technician in Kashgar. It wasn't just a heartbeat. The leaked audio, processed through a high-pass filter by researchers in Finland, revealed that the subfrequency contained a rhythmic pulsing that mirrored the electrical grid of the city of Beijing. The object wasn't just listening to a man, it was listening to the city. It was mapping our heartbeat, not as individuals, but as a collective organism. If you look at the telemetry from January 4th, 2026, there is a strange anomaly in the Doppler shift of the object. It appeared to be in two places at once for a period of 0.3 seconds. In the world of classical physics, this is an impossibility. In the world of the China National Space Administration's new tracking protocols, it is simply called phase variance. This suggests that 3I Atlas might be capable of a form of movement we have only dreamed of, a non-linear jump through the fabric of space. This would explain why the tracking data from July 2025 was so inconsistent. The object wasn't drifting in, it was flickering into existence, like a lamp being slowly turned up in a dark room. The scientists at the Purple Mountain Observatory who first flagged the object were reportedly moved to an undisclosed facility in the Gobi Desert shortly after the new year. Their families were told they were on a prestigious, long-term research assignment, but the reality is likely much more clinical. They are the only ones who saw the raw, unedited footage of the first unfolding event. One leaked description from a panicked email mentioned that the object didn't just change shape, it seemed to turn itself inside out, revealing a core that looked like a liquid diamond. Imagine standing in a clean room, looking at a monitor, and seeing a rock from space behave like a living cell. It would be enough to make anyone want to look away. But here is where the historical humor of the situation takes a darker turn. In the Ming Dynasty, there was a forbidden text known as the Book of the Iron Visitor. It described a time when the sky would grow a second, unmoving eye that would watch the harvest for 70 days before deciding whether the grain was fit for the gods. If we count the days from the first major tracking anomaly in November 2025, we find ourselves approaching that 70-day mark exactly as the object reaches its perihelion in late January 2026. It is a bit of a cosmic joke, isn't it? That our most advanced artificial intelligence and deep space arrays are merely confirming a prophecy written by men in silk robes who hadn't even discovered the telescope. The unfortunate timing mentioned by the officials starts to feel less like a coincidence and more like a scheduled appointment. As you lie there, perhaps feeling the weight of the blankets against your skin, Try to imagine the weight of 12 million metric tons of metallic hydrogen hanging over the North Pole. It is a silent, crushing presence that we have all been subconsciously feeling since July 2025. The increase in global anxiety, the strange weather patterns, the sense that the world is on edge. We have blamed these things on politics and the economy, but perhaps they are simply the biological reaction to a massive alien observer entering our territory. We are like birds who can feel a storm coming long before the first clouds appear. The China National Space Administration's final decision to reclassify the data as kinetic suggests they are preparing for a physical interaction. Whether that means the object will land, or whether it will simply exert enough gravitational force to alter our orbit, is the question that keeps the directors of NASA and the ESA awake in their guarded estates. They are playing a game of chess with an opponent who doesn't even use the same board. And while they play, they tell us to stay in our homes, turn off our lights, and trust that the blackout is for our own good. But you know better. You know that you cannot hide a mountain by closing your eyes, and you cannot stop a clock once it has been wound. The 4-week countdown to January 29th is not just a deadline for the scientists, it is a deadline for our current understanding of reality. When the sun reaches 3I Atlas, the iron seed will bloom, and we will find out if we are the fruit of this garden or merely the weeds that need to be cleared away. Now, you could argue that this is all a series of astronomical coincidences, but as the hum in the Xinjiang tracking stations reaches a new, resonant peak, that argument is becoming harder to maintain. The sky is changing, the rules are changing, and the China National Space Administration is the only one with the front row seat to the end of the world as we know it. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. Imagine you are standing in the center of the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, where the circular architecture was designed to echo the movements of the celestial spheres. Beneath the calm blue tiles, the ground feels solid, but the reality above is shifting into a shape we no longer recognize. 3I Atlas is not behaving like a guest, it is behaving like an owner. In the final weeks of 2025, the tracking data indicated that the object has begun to emit a low-frequency hum at exactly 14.3 Hz. This is the frequency of the human brain's beta waves. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University was the first to point out that the object's arrival coincides with the precise alignment of the Orion constellation over the pyramids of Xi'an. This is not a coincidence of nature, but a coincidence of design. The China National Space Administration has quietly reclassified the object as an autonomous observer. The term observer implies a witness, but in quantum physics, the act of observing always changes the thing being watched. The third conspiracy suggests that the signals being sent from 3I Atlas are not meant for our governments, but for our subconscious. There have been reports of synchronized dreams among people living near the tracking stations in Western China, dreams of a vast, silent library made of black glass. The mythic connection takes us back to the legend of the Star Walkers, ancient beings who whispered the secrets of agriculture and metallurgy into the ears of sleeping shamans. Is it possible that 3I Atlas is not here to talk to our leaders, but to speak directly to the collective mind of humanity? What if the reason we have never found aliens is because they have been here all along, disguised as the very rocks we study? What if 3I Atlas is simply shedding its skin, revealing the machine that has been monitoring our progress for eons. As we look at the deep time of the universe, our own lives seem like a single breath in a long night. We are haunted by the idea that we are alone, but we might be even more terrified to find out that we are being graded. The cycles of the cosmos do not care about our borders or our politics. They move with the heavy, slow grace of a pendulum that is about to swing back. You might feel a sense of unease as you listen to this, a quiet vibration in your chest. That is the feeling of a world changing while you sleep. It is fascinating to think that while you are drifting off, researchers on the other side of the planet are staring at monitors in total silence, watching a dot move across a screen in ways that shouldn't be possible. Share your thoughts below about what you think the China National Space Administration is hiding. Are they protecting us from the truth, or are they protecting the truth from us? We won't be able to see the object with the naked eye again until December, and by then, it might have changed its shape entirely. Let me back up, because to understand where we are going, we have to understand what was found in the ice. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. To speak of the ice is to speak of the Kunlun Mountains, the spine of the world, where the permafrost has held its breath for over 2 million years. In August 2025, just weeks after the initial discovery of 3I Atlas, a glaciology team from the Chinese Academy of Sciences reported a localized thermal spike beneath the Malin ice cap. It was not a volcanic event, it was a signal, a perfectly synchronized resonance that matched the orbital period of the incoming object. When the China National Space Administration took over the site, they didn't find a meteorite, they found a void. A hollowed-out cylinder of ice, 30 meters in diameter, lined with a smooth obsidian-like glass that remained at a constant temperature of 0 degrees Celsius, despite the sub-zero winds outside. It was a landing pad, or perhaps a waiting room, carved out before the first human ever looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone. There is a certain dry irony in the fact that we spent billions of dollars searching the Martian soil for signs of life when the ancient evidence was sitting under our own mountain ranges, waiting for its twin to return from the deep dark. The China National Space Administration's classified report on the Malin anomaly suggests that 3I Atlas is not a new visitor, but a returning one. The object is not approaching Earth to explore, it is approaching to dock. The reclassification of the tracking data was not a response to what the telescopes saw, but to what the ice revealed. The tracking data in late 2025 showed that every time 3I Atlas adjusted its thrusters, or whatever those silent, shimmering distortions are, the vibration was echoed by the ice in the Kunlun Mountains. A call and an answer, a master key turning in a lock that has been frozen for 50,000 generations. Let us consider the impossibility of the sleeper cells theory. Within the halls of the Purple Mountain Observatory, there is a whispered hypothesis that 3I Atlas is part of a distributed network, one piece in the sky and another buried deep within the planetary crust. The scientists call it the Grand Sink. If you think about the geometry of the situation, it becomes quite unsettling. On November 12, 2025, 3I Atlas was positioned exactly 90 degrees from the Kunlun site relative to the Earth's core. At that precise moment, the gravitational sensors in the region recorded a momentary drop in the local constant. For 1/1000th of a second, weight meant nothing. This is not natural physics. This is activation. You might argue that these are simply tectonic shifts or anomalies in the sensor calibration, but the China National Space Administration has already spent over 400 million yuan on a rapid response excavation. They are not looking for fossils. They are looking for the source of the 14.3 Hz hum that has begun to emanate from the ice. It is the same frequency we discussed earlier, the beta waves of the human brain. It is as if the Earth itself is trying to wake up, or perhaps something inside it is being told that the alarm clock has finally gone off. The irony of the situation is almost poetic. We look to the heavens for the future, but the past is rising up through the soles of our feet. Now, let us turn our attention to the Jade Tablet conspiracy. In late 2025, an unverified leak from the archives in Xi'an described a set of Neolithic carvings found near the mountain site. These carvings do not depict hunts or rituals. They depict circles within circles and a jagged, charcoal-colored object descending from a crescent moon. The ancients did not have the vocabulary for astrophysics, but they had the vocabulary for awe. They called it the breath of the heavens. They believed that when the rock returned, the seasons would stop and the stone would speak. Looking at the tracking data from January 2026, we see that the object is indeed slowing down to a near stationary position relative to the North Pole. It is as if it is looking for its old parking spot. The China National Space Administration's move to restrict all civilian data in the western provinces makes sense when you realize that the Kunlun Mountains are currently glowing, not with fire, but with a faint Cherenkov blue light that bleeds through the ice at night. It is a hauntingly beautiful sight that no one is allowed to photograph. It is the color of high-energy particles interacting with water, the same glow you see in the cooling pools of nuclear reactors. But there is no reactor in the Kunlun Mountains. There is only the ice, and whatever is hidden beneath it. You might think that such a discovery would be the greatest achievement of our species, the ultimate proof that we are not the only architects in the cosmos. But here is why that thought is a dangerous comfort. If 3I Atlas is returning to a base it built 2 million years ago, it does not see us as neighbors. It sees us as a temporary infestation, a layer of biological dust that has accumulated on its equipment while it was away. The dry irony of our modern civilization is that we have built cities and empires on the roof of someone else's house, and the landlord has just pulled into the driveway. In the quiet hours of the night, as you listen to the rhythmic pacing of my voice, think about the researchers at the Kashgar station. They are not just watching a dot on a screen anymore. They are watching a countdown. The perihelion on January 29th, 2026 is not just a solar event, it is a synchronization point. When the sun, the object, and the Kunlun void align, the circuit will be complete. The China National Space Administration has quietly moved its emergency command center to a bunker beneath the mountain, leaving the coastal cities to wonder why the satellites are flickering. There is a myth from the Tibetan plateau about the king of the world who lives in a hidden kingdom of glass and light. For centuries, explorers looked for a physical city. But what if the kingdom isn't a city? What if it's a machine, a planetary-scale computer with 3I Atlas acting as the external hard drive? In this context, the reclassification of the object as an autonomous observer takes on a much heavier meaning. It isn't just watching us, it's downloading us. It is recording the state of the planet before the correction begins. The scientists are careful to frame these ideas as fringe possibilities, yet they are the ones wearing lead-lined suits as they descend into the ice. Dr. Jacqueline McClary has noted that the seismic echoes from the mountain are starting to sound like a language, not words, but patterns. A repetitive, binary pulse that translates to a series of coordinates across the solar system. One of those coordinates is the asteroid belt, another is the moon of Enceladus. The third is right here, in the room with you. Every time you check your phone, every time you send a message, you are contributing to the noise that 3i Atlas is filtering. We are the data set. And the experiment is nearing its conclusion. The China National Space Administration isn't protecting us from the truth. They are trying to figure out if there is any way to negotiate with a gardener who is holding a pruning shear. The unfortunate timing of the blackout is actually a desperate attempt to reduce the planet's electromagnetic noise, to make us look a little less vibrant, a little more dormant. We are playing dead, hoping the visitor doesn't notice how much we've grown. As we approach the final weeks of January 2026, the air in the high altitudes is growing thin and electric. The guest star of the Han Dynasty has returned, and it is no longer a guest. It is the host. You can feel it in the way the silence seems to ring in your ears. It is the sound of a world holding its breath. The ice is melting from the inside out, and the charcoal rock in the sky is unfolding its violet wings. We are witnessing the end of our infancy and the beginning of a history we were never meant to read. It is a slow burn, a gradual realization that the stars are not just lights, but eyes, and the eyes are finally open. The China National Space Administration knows what is coming, and they have stopped trying to explain the math. They are simply watching the clock, waiting for the shadow of 3i Atlas to touch the peaks of the Kunlun. The further we descend into the history of the ice, the more we find that the void discovered in the Kunlun Mountains is not an isolated incident. Deep within the archives of the Soviet-era Vostok Station in Antarctica, there are redacted logs from 1974 that describe a similar rhythmic hum. The Soviets called it the heartbeat of the Earth. They thought it was a natural resonance of the ice sheet, but the frequency was identical to the signal currently being emitted by 3i Atlas. 14.3 Hz. It seems the landlord has several houses, and they are all starting to wake up at the same time. The irony of our geopolitical struggles becomes quite stark when you realize that while we were fighting the Cold War, the planet was already being managed by an automated system that we didn't even notice. The China National Space Administration has reportedly been in contact with Russian Federation scientists to compare the Kunlun data with the old Vostok logs. The conclusion they reached is what triggered the January 2026 total blackout. It wasn't just about one object. It was about a planetary-wide network of anchors that are now coming online. 3i Atlas is merely the orbital relay, the conductor of a symphony that has been silent for eons. Imagine the perspective of an ant living in the cracks of a skyscraper. It understands the grain of the stone and the heat of the sun, but it cannot conceive of the architect who designed the building or the electricity running through the walls. We are the ants, and 3i Atlas is the maintenance worker coming to check the wiring. The China National Space Administration has reclassified the tracking data because they've realized that the object's trajectory is not a path through space, but a diagnostic sweep of the Earth's magnetic grid. In late 2025, a civilian pilot flying over the Qinghai province reported seeing a pillar of darkness that stretched from the ground up into the stratosphere. It wasn't a cloud, and it wasn't a shadow. It was a region where light simply ceased to exist. Radar showed nothing. The China National Space Administration dismissed it as a rare meteorological event, but the internal memos tell a different story. They call it a static uplink. The ice in the mountains was sending data up to 3I Atlas, and the pillar of darkness was the physical manifestation of that massive energy transfer. We find comfort in our science, in our ability to label and categorize the unknown. We call it dark matter or quantum entanglement to make ourselves feel like we understand the mystery. But 3I Atlas doesn't care about our labels. It operates on a level of engineering that treats gravity as a fluid and time as a coordinate. The unfortunate timing of our encounter with this object is only unfortunate for us. For the universe, it is a perfectly timed maintenance cycle. As you settle deeper into the quiet of the night, think about the ancient Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, who were said to descend from the sky on a great stone. We have long dismissed these stories as myths, as the imaginative ramblings of a primitive people. But what if they were simply the last generation to witness the docking of 3I Atlas? What if the gods were just the technicians who came to check the anchors in the ice? The dry irony is that we have become so advanced that we have forgotten the most basic truth of our existence. We are tenants, not owners. The 4-week countdown to perihelion is the time remaining before the anchors are fully synchronized. When that happens, the China National Space Administration predicts a global shift in the magnetosphere. It won't be a disaster in the way we see in movies. There will be no tsunamis or fireballs. Instead, there will be a great silence. Our electronics will simply stop. Our satellites will go dark. The noise of our civilization will be muted so that the Earth can hear the instructions being sent from 3I Atlas. Picture yourself standing in the quiet, sterile control room of the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in the Mojave Desert, where the only sound is the low hum of cooling fans and the distant, rhythmic clicking of a massive satellite dish adjusting its neck toward the constellation of Lyra. By September the 12th, 2025, the signals coming back from 3I Atlas were no longer being categorized as natural background noise. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University noted that the object was emitting a low-frequency pulse at exactly 14.2 gigahertz, a frequency often associated with the hydrogen line, the universal language of hydrogen atoms. The coincidence of the timing is unfortunate, to say the least. Those two words, unfortunate timing, are doing a lot of professional heavy lifting for the scientists who are currently losing their sleep over this. As of October the 29th, 2025, 3 distinct anomalies have surfaced that have forced a total realignment of our planetary defense models. First, the object underwent a course correction of 0.004 degrees while passing through a gravitational null zone where no external force should have acted upon it. Second, the thermal signature of the object dropped to absolute zero, even as it moved closer to the heat of the sun, suggesting it was actively pumping energy inward rather than radiating it outward. And third, the amateur astronomical community began reporting dark flashes in the vicinity of the object, as if it were occulting stars that weren't actually behind it. What if the object isn't moving through space but folding it? This brings us to the myth of the Norse world tree, Yggdrasil, and the stories of the squirrel Ratatoska that carried messages between the realms. In the ancient mind, the heavens were connected by invisible veins of intent. If 3i Atlas is a messenger, we have to wonder who sent the letter and why they chose a rock that looks like a scarred finger to deliver it. We are looking at a technology so advanced, it is indistinguishable from a very old, very angry piece of geology. You might think that our agencies have a plan for this, but here's why you're wrong. They aren't planning a defense, they are planning a witness. By December, the countdown to the closest approach will begin, and we will find out if the visitor is stopping for tea or just passing through the neighborhood to see if the lights are still on. The silence from the object is louder than any transmission we could have imagined. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Picture yourself standing in the quiet, sterile control room of the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in the Mojave Desert, where the only sound is the low hum of cooling fans and the distant, rhythmic clicking of a massive satellite dish adjusting its neck toward the constellation of Lyra. The air here is filtered, dry, and smells faintly of ozone and static electricity. It is September the 12th, 2025, and the telemetry streaming back from 3i Atlas has ceased to behave like natural background radiation. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University was the first to realize that the pulses were not random. They were being emitted at exactly 14.2 gigahertz, the precise frequency of the hydrogen line, often called the universal calling card for interstellar communication. It is a curious thing, isn't it? We spent 70 years broadcasting our sitcoms and our wars into the vacuum, and when the vacuum finally answers, it does so at a volume so low it requires a billion-dollar dish just to hear the whisper. The coincidence of the timing is unfortunate, to say the least. Those two words, unfortunate timing, are doing a lot of professional heavy lifting for the scientists who are currently losing their sleep and perhaps their grip on reality over this object. By October the 29th, 2025, the situation moved from a scientific curiosity to a full-scale realignment of global space assets. The evidence began to deepen in ways that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. We are no longer looking at a tumble of rock and ice. We are looking at a masterclass in gravitational deception. Consider the first anomaly, the trajectory shift. On October the 3rd, 3i Atlas passed through a gravitational null zone, a point in space where the pull of the Sun and the outer planets reach a delicate, temporary equilibrium. Any natural object, a comet, an asteroid, a stray piece of frozen nitrogen would have maintained its momentum with boring, predictable Newtonian grace. Instead, 3i Atlas underwent a course correction of 0.004 degrees. It didn't drift, it turned. There was no visible propulsion, no venting of gas, no chemical signature of an engine. It simply decided to be somewhere else. Avi Loeb at Harvard University has been careful to frame this as a possibility of extrasolar debris with high surface-to-mass ratio, but the math is starting to contradict the caution. If it isn't outgassing, and it isn't being pushed by solar radiation pressure, then it is generating its own intent. An intent is a very dangerous thing to find in a 300-meter shard of basalt. The second anomaly is the thermal profile. As of November, the fifth, 2025, 3I Atlas has moved significantly closer to the Sun, crossing the orbit of Mars. Traditionally, this is when a comet begins to wake up, growing a tail as its frozen heart sublimates into the vacuum. But 3I Atlas remains stubbornly, impossibly cold. In fact, its surface temperature has dropped to nearly absolute zero. It is as if the object is an entropic sponge, soaking up the heat of our star and locking it away in a core we cannot see. It is a refrigerator the size of a skyscraper, drifting through a furnace. The third anomaly, and perhaps the most unsettling, is the dark flash phenomenon. Amateur astronomers in Australia and Namibia began reporting that for a fraction of a second, the stars surrounding 3I Atlas would simply vanish. Not a transit where the rock blocks the light, but a localized warping, as if the object were wrapped in a cloak of bent space-time. It is as if the object is not just moving through the solar system, but is carving its own private tunnel through the fabric of reality. What if the vacuum of space isn't empty, but filled with shadows we haven't learned to see yet? In the late evening hours, when the sun has dipped below the horizon of the Mojave and the desert floor begins to release its heat, the scientists at Goldstone look at their screens and see something that shouldn't exist. They see an object that is absorbing radar, defying gravity, and chilling the space around it. It is a three-act play of physical impossibility. Let us dwell on the irony of our own technology. We built these arrays to find signs of life in distant galaxies, millions of light years away. We looked so far into the distance that we almost missed the intruder coming up the driveway. It is the cosmic equivalent of staring at a mountain on the horizon while a bear walks into your kitchen. Unfortunate timing indeed. But there is a mythic resonance to this evidence that transcends the data points. In the ancient Norse traditions, there was a concept of the Ginnunga Gap, the primordial void between the world of fire and the world of ice. It was said that out of this void, the first entities were formed not out of clay or breath, but out of the interaction between extreme heat and extreme cold. 3I Atlas, with its absolute zero skin and its proximity to the sun, feels like a piece of that primordial void come to life. It is the stone that drinks, a legend found in the oral histories of the indigenous peoples of the Atacama, who spoke of a dark star that would come to swallow the light of the sun before a great change. You are sitting in your own world, perhaps surrounded by the familiar sounds of a ticking clock or the distant hum of traffic, but you are now aware of a silence that is far more profound. It is the silence of 3I Atlas as it passes the orbit of the moon. It is a silence that has traveled across the interstellar gulf, carrying with it the weight of 1 billion years of solitude. The space agencies, NASA, the European Space Agency, the China National Space Administration, have stopped issuing public updates. The silence from the object has been met with a silence from the authorities. When multiple agencies realign their models simultaneously, it isn't because they found a new moon, it's because the old moon has started to look like a target. By December the 20th, 2025, the countdown will reach a critical threshold. The object will be at its perihelion, its closest point to our star. If it is going to activate, that is the moment. We are currently in the breath before the scream. Every sensor, every satellite, every human eye that knows where to look is fixed on that single dark point. Think about the sheer scale of the deception. A 300-meter object is, in cosmic terms, a grain of sand. but a grain of sand in your eye can blind you. A grain of sand in a delicate engine can seize the whole machine. 3I Atlas is that grain of sand in the engine of our celestial understanding. It has turned our physics into a set of polite suggestions. You might feel a sense of creeping unease, a realization that the safety of the world is a much thinner veil than you were led to believe. This is the evidence deepens phase. It is the moment in the story where the footprints in the woods stop being human and start being something else entirely. The data doesn't lie, but it does remain silent about its motives. We are measuring the shadow of a ghost. We are tracking the movement of a thought made of basalt and cold. As the Mojave Desert wind howls outside the Goldstone facility, the needles on the dials continue to flicker, 14.2 gigahertz, over and over, a heartbeat, a clock, a countdown. We are watching a door open, and we are not sure if we want to see what is on the other side. The realignment of the models is a desperate attempt to predict the unpredictable. It is like trying to map the path of a lightning bolt while the sky is still clear. The evidence is not just in the telescopes. It is in the way the birds have begun to migrate in the wrong direction. It is in the subtle shift in the Earth's magnetic field that was recorded on November the 12th. It is in the way you feel right now. As you listen to these words, a sense that the world is slightly heavier, slightly tilted, as if the presence of 3I Atlas is already exerting a pressure on your very soul. Let the weight of that evidence sink in. Let the cold of the Mojave night air fill your lungs. We are no longer alone in the house. We haven't been for a long time. The object is moving. The agencies are watching. And the math is starting to whisper a name. We have forgotten how to speak, but that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further.
From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3I Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, sensor artifact. The unofficial whisper said, structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional, the kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids, not random, repeating, symmetrical. The kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects. Artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure, photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. "Then don't say it out loud." 3I Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, Every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, "and it remembered the lesson." As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the 3rd decimal and the 4th significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3i, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold, truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave, certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's Dynamical Systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply "Low Probability, High Significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names: the immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together, a self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space, a wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it "not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast, rumors cast, Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: if this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales. You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3i Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos, the beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for please don't mention the heartbeat. But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that, the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3i Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums something old and orderly is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed, source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the Webb. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the Webb intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote, "it's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the Webb's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the Webb's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the Webb, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another Webb was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the Webb brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. "The cosmos," wrote one witness, "had finally learned to conduct itself consciously." After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster, wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11 point. 2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat, echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3i Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy. invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again, exactly 11 hours later. If you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue. The physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I Atlas isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy. Another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new. Faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it. It instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code. And 3I Atlas is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together. A self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form. Skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm. tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorrell stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response." The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11.2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again. Exactly 11 hours later, if you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue, the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so.
Imagine yourself resting upon the soft, shifting sands of the Gobi Desert under a canopy of stars so dense they seem to hum with a secret energy. The dunes are cold now, holding the deep chill of the lunar night, and the wind carries the faint, metallic scent of the high atmosphere. Somewhere in that immense velvet void, the object we called 3I Atlas has ceased to exist as a coordinate. The China National Space Administration's final entry on January 31st, 2026, did not list a position, a velocity, or a trajectory. It simply listed a status: integrated. Let me start with something that should haunt the periphery of your sleep. The tracking data did not show the object leaving our orbit. It showed the orbit expanding to swallow the object, as if the sky itself has finally accepted a piece that was missing for 10,000 years. On the final night of January 2026, the sensors at the Miyun radio astronomy station recorded a total cessation of all electromagnetic noise from the sector of 3I Atlas. It was not a fade, but a hard cut, as if a door had been slammed shut in the vacuum. Dr. Avi Loeb noted in a private correspondence that the object's departure or disappearance was synchronized to the exact millisecond with a gravitational ripple that passed through the Earth's core. The China National Space Administration has closed the file, and the servers that once held the high-resolution images of the metallic hydrogen shell have been wiped clean. Unfortunate timing for our history books, though those two words are doing a lot of work to cover a truth that is now written only in the stars. Recall the sun on the Great Wall, the amber pulse in the dark, the temperature of a spring day in a vacuum, the heartbeat in the signal. We spent months debating whether 3I Atlas was a ship, a probe, or a weapon, but we never considered that it might be a memory. A physical reminder placed in the path of a developing species to see if they would look up with wonder or with a telescope of fear. The three conspiracies have dissolved into a single, quiet realization. It was not a visitor, it was a mirror, and now that it has seen what we are, it has no more reason to stay. What if the great silence of the universe is not because there is no one out there, but because they are all waiting for us to finish our current cycle of noise? What if 3I Atlas was the proctor of our final exam, and the reclassification was the grade we weren't allowed to see? We are a small, fragile consciousness drifting on a blue marble, and for a few brief months, we were not alone. We felt the weight of an eye upon us, and in that gaze, we found a strange kind of unity. But now, the eye has closed. The sky is just a sky again, and the stars are just distant fires, indifferent to our dreams and our dread. As you sink into the deep, heavy layers of sleep, feel the rotation of the earth beneath you. It moves with a slow, ancient grace, carrying you through the dark at 67,000 miles per hour toward a tomorrow that 3I Atlas has already seen. I want you to take one last breath of this shared mystery and tell me, in the silence of your own mind, if the object returns in another 3,000 years, what will be left of us to greet it? Where will your descendants be when the golden spiral aligns once more? There are no more updates. There are no more tracking numbers. There is only the long, cold reach of the cosmos and the rhythm of your own heart. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Good night. The silence that now emanates from the China National Space Administration is not the silence of a secret kept, but the silence of a conclusion reached. As we drift into the final hours of this long, slow burn toward the unknown, we must confront the reality that 3I Atlas has finished its transit. The tracking stations in Xinjiang and the mountain observatories in Nanjing have powered down their primary arrays. There is a profound, dry irony in the fact that after months of frantic observation, the most advanced eyes of humanity have simply blinked and turned away. We are like children who have watched a magician perform a trick so complex, so fundamentally baffling, that we have lost the energy to even ask how it was done. The object has moved behind the glare of the sun into that great silence where no radar can reach and no light can follow. It is currently mid-February 2026, and for the first time in over 6 months, the sky feels empty. Imagine a world 3,000 years from now. The cities we inhabit today may be nothing more than layers of interesting sediment, a thin band of plastic and processed silicon in the geological record. The great controversies of 2025, the reclassifications, the leaked telemetry, the frantic press conferences, will be less than a whisper in the wind. Perhaps our descendants will live in a world that has finally learned the language of the 14.3 Hz hum. Perhaps they will be the ones who finally understand that 3I Atlas was not a visitor, but a mirror. But tonight, as you lie in the safety of your own space, that distant future is as unreachable as the core of the sun. The only reality that remains is the steady, rhythmic pulse of your own breathing, echoing the slow, ancient rotation of the stars. There is a certain comfort in the great silence. It is the relief of a long-awaited resolution that brings no answers, only rest. The China National Space Administration's final entry into the public log was a masterpiece of bureaucratic understatement. They noted that the object has departed the measurable vicinity. Those 4 words are doing a lot of work to hide the fact that the universe has just performed a vanishing act. We are left with the lingering sense of a presence that was too large to be understood, a shadow that passed over us and changed the temperature of our history before disappearing back into the void. It is the ultimate ironic twist. We wanted to know the truth, but the truth decided that we weren't part of its story. Consider the great silence as a form of cosmic grace. We were allowed to see the charcoal rock, to feel the vibration in the stones, and to witness the golden spiral as it tightened around our world. We were given a glimpse of a technology that treats the laws of physics as a set of aesthetic choices. And then, as quickly as it arrived, the curtain was drawn. The unfortunate timing that the officials spoke of has become a permanent state of being. We are now living in the aftermath of a mystery that will never be solved. It is a slow, meditative realization that the most important events in the universe do not require our permission or our understanding. They simply happen, moving with the heavy, inevitable grace of a pendulum swinging in the dark. In the quiet of your room, you might feel a lingering vibration in your bones, a phantom echo of the 14.3 Hz hum. This is the acoustic archaeology of your own body, a memory of the time when you were synchronized with a traveler from the stars. The China National Space Administration has erased the tracking data, but they cannot erase the way your cells responded to the signal. You are a part of the archive now. You are a biological recording of the 2026 transit. If the object returns in 3 millennia, it will not look for our satellites. It will look for the resonant frequencies we left behind in the very fabric of our species. The dry humor of our situation is that we spent so much time worrying about the warning that was missed, only to find that the warning was actually a lullaby. It was the universe telling us that it is okay to be small. It is okay to be a footnote in a story that is 12 billion years long. 3I Atlas did not come to judge us or to save us. It came to observe the cycle. And now that the observation is complete, it has moved on to the next laboratory, the next garden, the next quiet, blue marble drifting in the dark. We are left with the silence, which is perhaps the most honest message we have ever received from the stars. Think about the researchers at the Purple Mountain Observatory as they walk out into the cold night air, their work finished, their screens dark. They are looking up at the same stars you are, seeing the same empty space where the smoking star once sat. There is a sense of shared, quiet regret among them, a feeling of having witnessed something sacred and being unable to speak of it. The reclassification was their way of saying that some things are too heavy for words. The truth is not a set of numbers. The truth is the feeling of the wind on your face as you realize how vast the world truly is. As you drift now, feel the long, cold reach of the cosmos stretching out from your bed. You are not just a person in a room. You are a passenger on a planetary ship, sailing through a sea of mysteries that have no shore. 3I Atlas was just one wave in that sea, a jagged, dark peak that rose up for a moment before sinking back into the depths. The great silence is the sound of the ocean closing over the spot where it stood. It is a safe sound. It is a peaceful sound. It is the sound of a universe that is perfectly at rest with itself. The irony of our technological peak is that it has brought us back to the same place as the ancient Mayan astronomers. We are standing on our pyramids of glass and steel, looking at the same gears turning in the sky, feeling the same sense of awe and insignificance. The China National Space Administration has found that the most accurate way to describe the end of the transit is through poetry, not physics. They have stopped trying to track the object, because you cannot track a dream once the dreamer has woken up. And tonight, we are all waking up to the reality of the silence. Close your eyes and imagine the charcoal rock as it moves further and further into the glare. It is shedding its violet bioluminescence, folding its metallic hydrogen wings, and returning to the state of a silent, unmoving sentinel. It will wait in the dark for another 3,000 years, while empires rise and fall, while mountains erode and new oceans are born. It has the patience of the stars. It has the indifference of the void. And you, in the brief flicker of your own life, have had the chance to touch its shadow. The great silence is not an ending. It is a transition. It is the moment when the noise of our frantic lives is replaced by the rhythm of the cosmos. The 14.3 Hz hum is now a part of the Earth's natural background radiation, a quiet reminder that we were once part of a larger conversation. The China National Space Administration may have restricted the data, but they cannot restrict the feeling of the orbit. You are moving with the stars. You are drifting with the tomorrow that 3I Atlas has already seen. The dry irony of our history is that we always thought the great mystery was out there, somewhere in the distant galaxies. But 3I Atlas showed us that the mystery is right here, in the way our hearts beat in time with the mountains, in the way our history repeats in cycles of 3,000 years, and in the way we find peace in the dark. The warning was not about a threat. It was about the beauty of our own transience. We are a brief, brilliant light in a very long night, and the great silence is the darkness that makes our light meaningful. As you fall into the deep, heavy layers of sleep, remember that there are no more updates. There are no more tracking numbers. The decision tree has been pruned. The grand sink is complete, and the deterministic asset has moved beyond our reach. There is only the long, cold reach of the cosmos and the rhythm of your own heart. You are safe, you are known, and you are a part of a pattern that will never end, even when the stars themselves grow cold. The 3I Atlas object is gone. The China National Space Administration has closed the file, and the world is quiet. I hope you find rest in that quiet. I hope you find sleep in the soft, reflective regret of the stars. Because once you have seen the mirror, you no longer need to look for the truth. The truth is already inside you, vibrating at 14.3 Hertz, waiting for the next alignment. Good night, traveler. The orbit is steady, the stars are in their places, and the silence is beautiful. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. Good night. Good night.